3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Houston, we've had a problem. Got fire in the cockpit.
The real story behind the Challenger disaster is far more heartbreaking than what we were all told. And please don't blink, because every second of this video will change the way you remember that day. Most people think the crew died instantly in the explosion, but the truth is much darker, much slower, and painfully human. The astronauts were still alive, still aware, as the cabin shot up 65,000 feet, then fell for nearly 3 whole minutes. And the part that hurts the most, NASA had protocols, but chose silence instead. Stay with me. This gets even deeper. Come along. The Challenger launch. What went wrong? The tragic events of January 28, 1986 were described as the result of a long sequence of engineering concerns that had been steadily overshadowed by management pressure and strict scheduling demands. According to detailed accounts, the fatal flaw that destroyed the Challenger did not appear suddenly on launch morning. Instead, the flaw had been known, discussed, and documented long before the shuttle ever rolled onto the launch pad. Reports explained that nearly 6 months before the disaster, NASA received test results showing that the O-ring seals inside the booster rockets could fail once temperatures fell to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, or below. This information created early unease among engineering teams because those seals played a central role in the safety of the vehicle. Observers later wondered how a warning so direct could be pushed aside. Attention then turned to the launch day conditions. The temperature dropped to 36 degrees Fahrenheit, a number far colder than any earlier shuttle launch. Reports described the launch pad covered in thick ice, with icicles stretching up to 12 inches long. Technicians had to use broom handles to break these icicles off the metalwork, a sight that raised serious questions about the wisdom of proceeding with a launch under such conditions. Accounts from Morton Thiokol, the manufacturer of the solid rocket boosters, made the situation even clearer. Engineers at Thiokol had studied temperature-related performance of the O-rings for years, and the data showed a strong and consistent relationship between cold weather and seal failure. Evidence from a January 1985 shuttle launch had already shown major burn-through of the O-rings under cold conditions. These details led many readers to wonder how the launch decision remained unchanged when earlier missions had already shown similar damage. The O-rings are essential seals placed between booster segments. Since 1982, these seals carried a Criticality 1 classification, a category reserved for issues that would result in total loss of shuttle and crew if failure occurred. 8 separate shuttle missions before Challenger had shown evidence of hot exhaust gases passing through the primary seal. Thiokol's O-ring expert, Roger Boisjoli, issued a strong warning in a memo, stating that freezing temperatures could cause total seal failure and lead to catastrophic loss of life. Testimony later revealed that this memo created serious concern among engineering teams, but the concerns did not stop the countdown toward launch. Attention then shifted to the crucial meeting the day before the launch. Thiokol engineers recommended that no launch should happen if the temperature dropped below 53 degrees Fahrenheit. During a major teleconference, NASA management pushed back against the recommendation. Reports quoted NASA's Booster Rocket Program Director, Larry Malloy, asking in frustration when Thiokol expected a launch to occur, if not now, even questioning whether the team preferred waiting until April. This moment showed the growing pressure to maintain schedule commitments. After a private internal meeting, Thiokol executives reversed the engineering recommendation and approved the launch. Engineering teams continued raising objections, but the final approval had already been delivered to NASA. Later testimony from Thiokol representative Alan MacDonald revealed unusual changes in the decision-making process. According to MacDonald, Thiokol historically carried the burden of proving the booster rockets safe for every launch. However, in the Challenger case, the situation flipped. NASA pushed Thiokol to prove that a launch would be unsafe, a reversal that created even more confusion and placed engineers in a defensive position. They would later learn that the warning signs weren't just there, they were practically screaming. Yet somehow, in the rush to meet deadlines and calm rising pressure, the people who approved the launch didn't fully grasp how dangerous the newest O-ring damage truly was. It wasn't just another technical note in a long report, it was the final clue before everything went wrong, and what happened next in the sky shocked the world in real time. Stay with me, because the moment of the explosion and everything that followed is something you need to see to understand. The explosion and what happened in the sky. 73 seconds were all it took to change space history forever, although what occurred outside that brief window revealed a disturbing truth about the fate of Challenger's crew. Beginning with the moment at T plus 0.678 seconds when small puffs of black smoke appeared near the right solid rocket booster. According to investigators, this early sign marked the beginning of a sequence that should have raised alarm immediately. The next major event came at T plus 58.788 seconds, when a tracking camera captured the first hint of a flame plume emerging from the same booster. Reports described how that plume grew steadily until T plus 60.988 seconds, at which point the flame became continuous and curved outward in a way that signaled serious structural failure. The timeline indicated that the crew remained unaware of the developing danger until T plus 72.284 seconds. At that point, the right booster separated from its attachment strut, causing a sudden and unusual sideways force that astronauts could physically feel. Voice recordings documented the final words heard from the spacecraft at T plus 73 seconds, when pilot Michael Smith uttered a final "uh-oh" before all contact ceased. Investigators later explained that, contrary to widespread belief, death did not occur at the moment of breakup. The story pointed out that after Challenger disintegrated, the crew cabin remained intact and continued rising in the air until reaching an altitude of approximately 65,000 feet. Medical specialists and engineers agreed that the astronauts likely remained conscious after structural breakup. Evidence supporting this conclusion came from personal egress air packs recovered from the wreckage. Reports confirmed that 3 out of the 4 recovered packs had been manually activated, including the unit assigned to pilot Smith. Since the pack sat behind Smith's seat in a location out of reach, investigators interpreted this detail as proof that another astronaut activated the device, indicating deliberate action and possible communication among crew members during the emergency. Further analysis focused on the G-forces experienced at the moment the cabin separated from the rest of the shuttle engineers, documented vertical forces between 12 and 20 Gs, lasting roughly 2 seconds. Studies showed that such accelerations, although extreme, remained within the range of human survivability, producing a low probability of fatal injury. Within seconds, these forces dropped below 4 Gs, creating conditions consistent with survival and consciousness. After detachment, the crew cabin continued along a ballistic path, essentially in freefall, for nearly 3 minutes. The final impact occurred at a speed of roughly 207 miles per hour, generating forces close to 200 Gs, far exceeding any survivable threshold. Structural evidence from the cabin revealed no window breakage during descent and no buckling in the flight deck floor, suggesting the cabin maintained overall integrity for most of the fall. NASA's response after the disaster raised serious questions among journalists, lawmakers, and families of the victims. Accounts stated that NASA chose to maintain an unusually restrictive information policy immediately after the explosion. Instead of following a pre-approved disaster protocol, senior officials adopted a strict no-comment approach and declined to answer even basic inquiries about the chain of events. This silence allowed speculation to spread rapidly across the country. observers noted that NASA attempted to control every detail of the information flow through official statements only, refusing to acknowledge unofficial reports, leaks, or eyewitness accounts. Eventually, after weeks of underwater searching, the crew cabin was located on the ocean floor at a depth of roughly 100 feet. Recovery operations proceeded quietly and without public visibility, adding to concerns about transparency. NASA withheld details about the cabin's condition for years and repeatedly denied the existence of telemetry data recorded after the explosion. Later investigations proved those denials false, reinforcing the perception of deliberate concealment. Medical findings also stirred controversy. Autopsy reports presented privately to selected officials and sealed from public view for decades indicated that several members of the crew likely remained conscious as the cabin descended toward the ocean. Investigators found evidence of emergency steps taken during the fall, pointing to organized efforts by the astronauts to respond to the crisis. One of the strongest indications came from the activation of the personal egress air packs. At least 4 packs showed signs of deliberate manual activation after the cabin separated from the shuttle. Specialists concluded that this activation could not have happened automatically, meaning the astronauts retained awareness and attempted to improve their chances of survival, even though the situation remained beyond recovery. Altogether, the account of those final minutes revealed a picture not of instantaneous death, but of a crew that faced the unfolding disaster with action, awareness, and remarkable composure. The tragedy, as investigators and experts later revealed, cracked open a story far bigger than anyone expected, a story that forced the public to slow down, rethink everything they believed about the Challenger accident, and confront the uncomfortable truth that so many questions were left hanging in the air. And as each layer peeled back, it became clear that what happened afterward was just as unsettling as the disaster itself. Stay with me, because the next part exposes the silence that shaped the entire narrative, and it's something you truly need to hear. NASA's silence and the search for the truth. NASA's handling of the Challenger disaster was later described as a striking example of how an agency could withhold essential information at a moment when the public needed clarity the most. The response in the hours and days following the explosion revealed a pattern of decisions that created even more confusion, suspicion, and emotional strain for journalists, investigators, and the families of the 7 astronauts. Observers said that NASA's immediate shift in communication behavior was unexpected, especially because the agency already had a carefully prepared disaster plan outlining how information would be shared in the event of a major accident. Instead of following that plan, NASA adopted what many described as an unusually strict silence. This silence raised the question of why an agency built on public trust, taxpayer funding, and transparent scientific progress would suddenly refuse to share even the most basic updates. Reports stated that NASA management quickly dropped the already approved communication strategy and replaced it with a rigid no-comment policy. Journalists asking simple questions about recovery efforts, cabin debris, or telemetry data were told that no answers could be given due to the ongoing investigation. This absolute refusal created a communication void that was soon filled with speculation, unofficial leaks, and independent expert guesses. The agency insisted that all details must come only from official channels, even though those channels provided almost no information at all. Many observers later asked whether the silence was meant to protect the investigation or to protect NASA from the consequences of earlier ignored warnings. Information that eventually surfaced painted an even more troubling picture. Search teams located the crew cabin on the ocean floor at a depth of about 100 feet, but the recovery operation was carried out in complete secrecy over several weeks. NASA kept nearly all details about the cabin's condition classified for many years, creating a lingering sense that the full truth remained hidden. Investigators and family members were told at the time that no telemetry data existed after the explosion. Yet later findings showed that data had in fact continued for several seconds. this revelation raised questions about why such information had been denied in the early days of the investigation. Perhaps the most deeply unsettling reports involved evidence related to the final moments of the crew autopsy findings, sealed for decades, indicated that the astronauts likely remained conscious as the crew cabin descended toward the ocean. Medical examiners described signs suggesting that some members of the crew had taken emergency steps during the drop. This possibility forced many families and observers to reconsider what they believed about the timeline of the disaster. Earlier claims had implied that the crew probably lost consciousness immediately, but later documentation conflicted with that belief. Overall, assessments of NASA's response argued that the agency's communication strategy not only intensified grief and mistrust, but also shaped the long-term public memory of the Challenger disaster. The combination of withheld information, classified reports, secret recovery operations, and delayed admissions created an atmosphere where many felt that the truth arrived too slowly and too reluctantly. Observers later reflected on how much the story might have unfolded differently if transparency had been embraced from the start. Families, desperate for answers, were left carrying an unbearable weight, while the public wrestled with rumors, half-truths, and decades of unanswered questions. Could honesty have eased their suffering? Could it have strengthened trust instead of eroding it, even amid one of the most harrowing tragedies in American spaceflight history? As the smoke cleared and the world searched for meaning, the questions didn't stop, and neither did the consequences. Every leak, every whisper, every painstaking investigation became part of a legacy that would shape the future of NASA and the way the nation looked at risk, responsibility, and human courage. In this next section, we dive deep into the aftermath. Investigations, leaks, and legacy. Stay with me till the very end, because what comes next will change the way you see everything that happened. The aftermath. Investigations, leaks, and legacy. The Challenger investigation entered a new phase when President Reagan created a special commission that exposed failures reaching far beyond a single mechanical flaw. According to detailed accounts, the creation of this commission signaled a turning point in public understanding of the disaster, shifting attention from broken hardware to deeply rooted organizational problems. The commission became known as the Rogers Commission, named after former Secretary of State William Rogers, who served as chair. The membership list drew widespread attention because it included several respected figures, such as astronauts Neil Armstrong and Sally Ride. However, reports stated that physicist Richard Feynman quickly emerged as the most powerful voice within the group, capturing public interest through clear and direct demonstrations. During one widely viewed hearing, Feynman pressed a sample O-ring into ice water to show exactly how cold temperatures reduced elasticity. This simple demonstration stunned observers, raising the question of how such a basic truth had escaped the decision-making process at NASA. Accounts from the time described visible tension inside the commission. Rogers reportedly confided to others that Feynman was becoming difficult to manage, even calling Feynman a real pain, a comment that later became part of the public narrative. Surrounding the investigation, Feynman's independent inquiries revealed even more troubling information. NASA managers claimed that the risk of shuttle failure was 1 in 100,000, a number so unrealistic that engineering staff privately placed the risk closer to 1 in 100. This discovery encouraged the public to question the entire system of communication within NASA. Media influence played a complicated role in both the disaster and the investigation. Reports stated that months before the launch, news outlets criticized NASA for repeated delays, and this criticism contributed to an atmosphere of pressure. A senior official at Kennedy Space Center later remarked that 98% of the push to launch came from media expectations. After the explosion, NASA avoided releasing information, which only deepened public frustration. Journalists began pressing harder for answers, creating a tense divide between NASA and the media. A Los Angeles Times survey eventually revealed that although Americans continued supporting the space program, the majority had lost trust in NASA leadership, largely because of the launch decision itself. The Rogers Commission eventually delivered 9 major recommendations that fundamentally reshaped NASA's future. The recommendations focused on structural reform, technical repair, and long-term safety improvements. Among the most significant directives were the redesign of the faulty solid rocket motor joints, a complete review of the shuttle program's organizational structure, and the creation of an Office of Safety, Reliability, and Quality Assurance reporting directly to the NASA administrator. Additional recommendations addressed landing safety improvements, the development of an escape system for crew members, and establishing realistic flight rates that matched NASA's actual resources rather than optimistic expectations. According to NASA records, every recommendation was accepted and implemented. This process required a full shutdown of shuttle flights for 32 months, marking the longest pause in the program's history. The extended break allowed engineers and administrators to rebuild systems from the inside out, leading to a far more cautious approach to future missions. Public discussion at the time often reflected on the irony that such drastic reforms only emerged after a preventable tragedy, raising the lingering question of why these changes had not been made earlier. In the end, the Rogers Commission transformed the national conversation about space travel. The investigation made it clear that the Challenger disaster could not be explained by a single cold morning or a single failed seal. The deeper cause lay in communication failures, unrealistic expectations, and a safety system that did not protect itself. The Commission's findings encouraged ongoing reflection on whether any organization can function safely when warnings are softened, risks are ignored, or pressure outweighs caution. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.